Mary and the Hendersons is a very special film for me, because when I saw it as a teenager, and I saw it again very recently, and I couldn't believe that the amount of lines that I remembered. I knew I knew exactly who was gonna say what and in what tone, and then how Melinda Dillon would say George, George all the time, and just little things. And I think I may have seen it more than once for me to remember it that much. But yeah, so I wanted to chat to you about that. But before that, I wanted to get a sense of how did you start in filmmaking, and what's your background, and just to kind of take me on that journey.
Well, I was born. I like to do a lot of family films, work with a lot of children, and they sort of are looking at this old guy. So I tell them I was born in the first half of the previous century, and they probably are wondering if I fought for the North or the South. So no, back in early in the mid '40s, after World War II, I was born in '44, so. In the late '40s, when I was becoming an age of awareness, my mom was managing the Uptown Theatre in Toronto, and we had a radio at home and a '70s record player. So my only window to an outside world was this movie theater, and it was one of those grand old movie palaces. It has since been torn down. My weekends were spent in a movie palace, watching whatever movie was on over and over again. And if I liked it, I watched it. If it terrified me, I would hide in my mother's office. I was very afraid of some science fiction movies. I don't know why. I looked at them later and thought I must be mental. If you ever saw It Came from Outer Space, you'll wonder why it scared me. But that big eyeball in 3D just freaked me out. Anyway, that was my window to a world. I didn't know what a motion picture was. I mean, I didn't know how it was created. I didn't know anything about a script or a camera or this and that. But it was a window to a world that was, I was totally taken by it. It was, just post World War II. It was war movies, westerns, and musicals, basically. Very few dramas being made. And I sort of just fell in love with movies, watching these movies over and over, on this big screen. I was the first kid in Canada to ever see 3D, because they ran it at the Uptown Theatre, and they wanted to test it the night before because it required 2 projectors at that time. And I was one of maybe 12 people in the audience. So that was an amazing experience. I mean, seeing 3D. Again, it was just this love of movies and love of storytelling. And I've always been, I hate to use the word an artist, but I've been someone who can paint and draw, and I love those skills. And so this was yet another extension of those skills, being able to write, being able to draw, being able to recreate, and change that vision, alter that vision, focus that vision, and the same thing applies to movie making. You take the audience on a certain ride, and you give them a close up here and a wide shot here, and you sort of are drawing that picture before their very eyes, and telling them a story, and using, every year it gets more and more amazing, but using what visual tools were at hand, and now it's just it's astounding. I mean, cartoons are like live action movies with characterized people, and you accept the reality that the animated character lives in as a real world. It's quite amazing. It's just I'm fascinated by the technology and how it's grown and made movie making kind of an anything goes. Back in the early days of well, let me go back to my history. So growing up in this movie theater, that was in the '40s. My parents then moved to Detroit. My dad became a stagehand in the IA, and his dad was a stagehand in the IA. So when I became 18 years old, I joined the union, and I was a stagehand in the IA, which means I was an apprentice for like 2 years, and you got the lowest jobs on the totem pole. In that time, from about 11 years old, when we moved to the States, to being 18, I met a friend named Robert Dyke, who makes movies, and his dad he had a love of movies, and his dad had an 8 millimeter camera. So it was amazing because we could create our own little movies. So we'd see a Ray Harryhausen film, and we'd come back and we'd build the creatures, and we'd do some stop motion animation, and we just, we sort of, out of a love for movie, fostered that. Then when I started working as a stagehand and could actually see how the business functioned, and got very few, like I said, as an apprentice, you were low person on the totem pole. So the first summer I ever worked, I got one day on a commercial that shot with a 35 millimeter camera. And I was just fascinated by the size and everything and the mechanics of this 35 millimeter camera, And the benefits we learned later on to being the lowest guy on the totem pole was it was the 60s. And one of the lowest jobs pay-wise and eating into your day-wise was being a spotlight operator. And so you'd get like $26 for a show, sometimes $28 for a show. But the shows you were running spotlight on were the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, any rock group you can think of, So I mean, looking back on it, it was like, yeah, you can't buy that for, I'd pay $28 for that. So anyway, so it was an education. Being, I went to college as an art major, theater minor, and then would spend my summers and my vacations working in the business, and just wanting and wanting and wanting to, be more and more a part of this business. I then joined the Camera Union out of Chicago. It's all one union now. And that allowed me to sort of put my name up for union jobs. And I found out that when a movie would come to town in Detroit, and probably any town, they'd bring their own movie crew, their own camera crew. And for every person they brought, they'd have to hire a local union a member. And usually what they would do, knowing that guy would never work, he was just there as a formality, sitting on a chair and picking up a paycheck. So I actually flew myself to California when I heard a production was coming to Detroit, get a meeting, it's probably much easier to do then, with the producer, and say, look, they're going to man for menu out of Chicago. They're going to give you a guy who's going to sit on an apple box for 6 weeks. If you put me in that position, I will work my ass off for you. And the first person I went to on that was Paul Schrader. And his first movie after Taxi Driver that he got to direct was Blue Collar. So I was the second unit director of photography on Blue Collar. Then we came back with George C. Scott, and we did Hardcore. And it was fascinating to actually, stick my toe in the water. That was my first, Blue Collar was my first ever legitimate screen credit. And it was a determination to want to be a movie maker. I think like I said earlier, use the tools at hand to best tell a story. And for me, that was movies. TV was still in its, 3-channel infancy back then. I fortunately, as the low guy on the totem pole, also got to work live TV shows, which is something I'll treasure forever because it's such a lost art. We used to flip hand-painted, hand-lettered cards in front of a camera, and they would, before they had electronic type and chyrons and all this stuff. So I mean, it was just a fascinating world of education. Education in learning more and more about what I had decided, to sort of do in my life, to do with my life, to be fortunate enough to do.
I'm actually from Toronto, and I have been living in Toronto for a good 33 years, and Uptown was a place that I used to go to watch movies. Uptown and Eaton Centre and Varsity in downtown Toronto. Those three.
Varsity, yep.
Yeah. And yeah, it is a shame because Uptown was, it had 3 theaters. I don't know back then in the 40s or 50s, but in the 90s, it had 2 in the basement and the giant auditorium on the top. And it's still, honestly, I've been to so many movie theaters since then, there hasn't been anything like that in terms of size, in terms of high ceilings, in terms of screen size. Yes, there's IMAX and all that stuff, but that was and it used to be packed because it was right in Bloor and Yonge, right? Like where everybody's schmoozing and stuff. Yep. So it used to be packed at any time of the day. It's great to see that your mom was a manager there, and you're from Toronto, and your story is interesting, right? Because that's one of the things that you mentioned, that back in the day, you could get a meeting with a producer, like, rather easily than probably now. And
Yes.
and it is, although we have more tools now, in the last, like when I started films, it was like literally like a digital age was coming in. I shot stuff on 16 millimeters, 8 millimeter, and then the digital camcorders came in. But now it's like, you have a phone, and and these phones, especially the most recent ones, like, you can, with apps, you can shoot pretty darn good stuff. But one thing technology has sort of taken away is that art of storytelling, the simplicity of story. And which brings me to your film, Harry and the Henderson, because I was watching it again last week, and I counted, aside from extras, there was like 11 or 12 characters, with 4 or 5 being the major ones, the Harry's family, and it was simple. It was a simple premise. It wasn't like, gigantic plot, like 5 stories going, and there's, a Bigfoot running around, and how their stories are interconnected and all that. And that's missing nowadays. It's barely, it's not there as much as it used to be, back in the 80s and the 90s and even 70s. So, having said that, how did you come on board in Harry and Henderson? How did it all start?
Well, I was, again, I had moved to California, had done a couple of movies in Detroit, local movies on 16 millimeter. One, I don't know how you would use the word classic in this genre, but one is regarded as somewhat of a classic in the grindhouse, very low budget motorcycle mania world of the 70s, shoot 'em up, biker movies, and that's called Northfield Cemetery Massacre. We shot that in Detroit, and I got an opportunity to work with Michael Nesmith. He scored that movie, and I remember screening it to him on 16 on an old stand-up moviola, the whole movie. He stood there, watched it, and at the end of the movie, he said, "This is a terrible movie." I said, "Yes, it is." But we made it, and we're real proud of it. Would you like to score it? And he said, "Yes, I will." And he wrote a very good score for it, and he and I struck up a relationship. And that moved me to California. That was the opening of a door that, where I sat my family down and said, "We're going to leave Detroit, and we're going to go and, pursue my dream and move to California." So Nez and I worked together for quite a few years. We did a piece called Elephant Parts, which was music and comic videos and everything. We won the first Grammy ever for a music video. And that led me to sort of expanding my reach in California. And in doing commercials, I would do commercials too. They were to me that's like going to the gym for a movie maker. You're in and out in 3 or 4 days. You get to use the newest technology. It was a great experience. I met Allen Daviau, and Allen Daviau has passed in the early days of COVID here. An amazing cinematographer. He shot E.T. and he shot a lot of the early Spielberg movies. He shot the short Amblin, that the name Amblin, Spielberg's company was named after. Well, Alan recommended, Amazing Stories was started, and Alan recommended, because we'd done the numerous commercials together. I shot the Dummies campaign. We shot for 11 years on Vincent and Larry telling everybody to buckle up, the 2 crash dummies. And that was, so we were later, I don't know what you'd call, installed into the Smithsonian because of that project. And Alan was a big part of, setting the look for that project. But Alan recommended me to Amazing Stories, and I don't know if it was directly to Spielberg or Amazing Stories, and they reached out to me and sent me a script and said, we'd like your impression of this. We're thinking of you as possibly directing it. And it was a good script. I liked the script. It was called, at the time, it was called Mummy Dearest, which the movie Mummy Dearest was already out. And I thought, why, if you're going to do an original piece, why put someone else's title that will immediately conjure some other image,
Yeah.
And so ultimately the title became Mummy Daddy. But I remember going in and telling my version of what I wanted to do with the Mummy Dearest script, turning it into Mummy Daddy, and had done sort of all my due diligence and read everything I could about what was happening with Amazing Stories. At that time, it was first season. Yeah. And what I heard Steven say on one of the interviews was he was looking for filmmakers who would take these ideas and bring themselves and innovate into, what was happening. So I added the second Mummy to the Mummy Daddy movie, which was the legend of old Ra Ahmed Khan, the original dummy that had been escaped some carnival years ago. And I remember telling the whole story the way I would like to tell it, sitting at that table. And at the end of the meeting, Steven Spielberg looked at me and he said, "Well, I didn't like the second Mummy." And that was my whole contribution to what I would do with this. He said, "Until you got to the end, then I understood it." He said, "So when do we shoot?" And it was that fast. My heart thing almost exploded out of my chest, like an alien movie. And then I think this meeting was probably Mayish or something like that. And they looked up and they said, "August the 4th. And I thought, oh, that is so far away. This will never happen. This is too good to be true, to just be in this moment. But sure enough, it did happen. And we shot the amazing story called Mummy Daddy. Got to use a lot of great character actors in it. And Bronson Pinchot, who was kind of an ersatz Spielberg in the characterization of the director in the movie, came on board and was really good in it. And one night in the editing room on Amazing Stories, I was going through a cut, and I think the editor had gone home, and Spielberg came into the editing room and he said, how's your cut going?" I said, "Pretty good." I said, "I'm feeling pretty good about it." He said, "Well, screen it for me." I said, "Okay." So we set it up on the standing there again on an old stand-up moviola, and we screened. It was about a 22-minute cut of Mummy Daddy. And Stephen made some notes and suggestions, and they were good and they were smart. And then he said to me, "Have you got a film you'd like to do?" And I said, "Well, I have a movie called Harry and the Hendersons. And I only have, about half the script done right now. But I'll have it done probably in the next 2 weeks because, this whole experience has inspired me to really, move as forward as I can." He says, "Well, why don't you tell me the story?" And I said, "Well, I would much rather bring you the completed screenplay in a couple of weeks." And he looked at me and he said, "Why don't you tell me the story?" So, blah, blah, blah. I spilled out the story of Harry and the Hendersons to him, to him in the editing room there. And he said, "Okay." He said, "My office tomorrow morning around 10 o'clock. He said, "We might be able to get this financed. I know some people." And he was very glib about it and everything, But and I went home that night thinking, I have maybe a movie deal here on this movie that I really want to do. And the origins of Harry and the Hendersons were in working with Michael Nesmith. We had a co-writer and a raconteur of crazy stories named Bill Martin. And Bill Martin had written, along with his writing partner, Ezra Rappaport, they had written a half-hour sitcom called Harry and the Hendersons. And their vision of Harry was Fred Gwynn, with hair glued to his face, and that was the creature. But it was a very 3-camera-ish sitcom thing. And I remember reading it and saying to Bill Martin, I said, "Look, I think this is a movie. This should be a movie." And they said, "No, it's a sitcom." I said, "Well, that's my view." And I was making enough money at the time that I said to them, let me buy this off you. Let me option this and see what I can do with it. And we weren't talking big amounts of money back then. Maybe $3,000, $5,000, something like that. And so I basically bought the ownership of the story for that much money, and then turned it into a screenplay. And then through this turn of events that I explained, because of Amazing Stories, I had something in hand that I could, work on and take to Stephen. And so Bill Martin, I try to be loyal to whoever I work with. Bill Martin and Ezra and I set about writing the story. And I realized at one point that they couldn't get the television out of what they were doing. And I took it over and, tried to make it into a bigger, bolder motion picture. And that's basically, that's how Harry came about. It was just a series of very, very fortunate events that had taken a lot of time and hard work to sort of be in that fortunate coincidental position, where everything's the perfect storm of someone aspiring to make movies and that moment when all of a sudden you're faced with that reality. It's going to happen. So
Yeah,
sounds
no,
a little
that
corny.
no, 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 it's not corny at all because it's true. And, everybody talks about luck and hard work, which one is more? And I believe that luck comes when you work hard. And if you're not going to work hard, luck may come, but it may go. Like, you might get lucky once, but if you're not working hard to prove yourself, then it's going to go away. You're going to lose that opportunity. And that's the hardest part. And I didn't know that Alan was the DP on this film until I saw it recently, a couple of weeks ago, and now that you mention it, it had that feel of his cinematography of that was in E.T., that was in other films, and what was it like working with him aside from being a friend, like just as a cinematographer and his eye for things and light and framing.
It was as everything was in those, and still is. It was an education to see just basically how he understood. One of the things I insisted on in Harry when I went to Rick Baker, and we could talk about the whole Rick Baker thing, is that the actor's eyes, I needed a hole. I needed holes in that suit so the human inside could come out. And the only holes I really wanted were the holes for the actor's eyes. So you're seeing Kevin Peter Hall's real eyes in Harry. And Alan really understood about lighting the actors and lighting their eyes and really getting into a close-up, for emotional reasons and whatever. And so I wanted the creature to be able to be as good as a human would be, given that situation with the lens right in their face. And I love the way Alan just rendered people and found a way to help focus the audience onto whether it was the emotion in the eyes, like in the scene in Harry when John almost shoots him in the house. I mean, people were weeping as we were shooting it. It was amazing. And that was the one scene early on in the shooting that I realized, I think everybody realized, that this was just not a guy in a suit anymore. This was a living being, and then back to Alan, like all phases of this kind of thing. You can guess how long it's going to take to do something, and it takes longer, and then some other department is upset and this and that. So I would say, not to any discredit at all, but Alan took longer to light than a lot of cinematographers, and that kind of pisses off the in-office production people, wondering why we aren't making our day here and this and that. Even John Lithgow came to me once and said, why did we even? Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Go ahead.
Why do we even fucking rehearse, Bill? It's been an hour and a half, and it's a scene in the kitchen. But Alan was meticulous, and it was his way. And, quite honestly, I was feeling very grateful to be working with him being Spielberg's cinematographer. So I wasn't going to push too hard. I could relay the concerns and the notes I was getting, from Sid Sheinberg, the head of Universal, and different people going, what's going on? Why are we adding days here? Blah, blah, blah. But it was a great experience. And he was the right cinematographer for that movie. It hit, he brought the heart through the, he found a way to pull heart out through the lens, like I tried to pull it out through the story and the performance.
And 100%, and no discredit to the editor of the film, but one of the things I loved about Harry and the Henderson and other films that are really, really great, you get so involved into the characters and the visuals, not visuals as in like a ooh-ah type of approach, but you're just so embedded in it that you forget about the editing. Like, that's one of the things I noticed with Harry and the Hendersons, that normally I would like, that was a long shot, or, there was a cut from here, that I did not feel that all, because it was just so character-driven story. And Kevin Peter Hall, it's incredible that same year he did Predator, and completely two opposite, characters, and one where he plays like a monster, and here he plays like a lovable, Bigfoot. And how was it like working with him? And was he working at Predator at the same time, or was it before? I know they came out the same year.
Yeah, no, Predator came after Harry. It definitely because he became the big guy in the suit. You know, he was the guy you went to if you had a big guy in a suit, and I think that's why he was an instant choice for Predator. He was such a gentleman, and so again, he was so grateful, you know, to be a part of it. And as the affection for Harry grew, the pride, and the commitment in Kevin grew. You know, it was again like everything, a learning experience, and he was the right person. I remember John Lithgow coming to me one day and pulling me aside and saying, "Bill, you're asking me to be way too broad," you know, because he had been nominated for that time for 2 Academy Awards, in terms of Endearment and Garth, and or Garth, and he said, "You're asking me to be way too broad." I said, "John, you know, your co-star is 8.5 feet tall. He's completely covered with hair. If you think you can be too broad, and we kind of dispelled the whole thing, you know, which was kind of interesting. The studio, just a note on that, they thought it would be funnier. This is the kind of thing you have to fight, and I sort of underline the word fight. Is that they went, well, why don't you, instead of John Lithgow, who's 6'4", why don't you go with Danny DeVito? You know, because then you got the little guy and you got the Bigfoot, and it like, yeah. But with John Lithgow, I have two beings that are almost eye to eye, who can look each other in the eye, you know, and John Lithgow can realize this is more than a creature from the woods, you know, and Harry can realize this is more than a human or a hunter that I have to fear, you know, and so I won the John Lithgow Danny DeVito fight there.
Good for you. And I think although Danny DeVito is a wonderful actor, I don't see him, not probably because now that I've already seen Harry and the Hendersons so many times, but I just don't see that. And you know, Kevin Peterhall's makeup and all the prosthetics and everything, how long did that take each day? I mean, I would imagine, especially back in that day, what was that like?
Well, it was surprisingly quick due to Rick's ingenuity. I remember someone at when it came Academy Awards nomination time, and Rick was going to be nominated for Harry and the Hendersons. Somebody in the makeup community brought up the fact that this was not makeup and should not be categorized as makeup. You know, this was a complete suit and was not makeup. And I remember I was called on to speak for Rick at the Academy to defend my position on why I thought it should be considered under the makeup banner and qualify for Academy Award nomination. And I remember saying to them that it isn't a suit, you know, because it's Kevin's eyes, and Kevin was articulating, you know, most of what was going on with any kind of head movement, you know, little mouth, because the mouth was a prosthetic out that hung below his chin. But I basically argued that this was a makeup, and it was just like any other makeup. Like you'd put old makeup on an actor, you wouldn't say, you know, you were changing them there. I said you can't take the whole bodysuit and try to make that in the makeup character. We're talking about Harry's face. And I said, to Rick's credit, one of the things that was so amazing is that the rig was so well built that we would do makeup on Kevin Peterhall's eyes, and then they could put the suit on, and then do whatever kind of adhesive they would need between the suit and around his eyes. So it took only about 20 minutes to get Kevin ready to go. And I thought that was an amazing thing. And I actually brought that up to the Academy, that this is a makeup, but it's an advancement in makeup, because, you know, the actor really is running the show as far as Harry's face, and the actor is in makeup. And to Rick's credit, you know, it was smartly done, that the production did not have to wait, or Kevin didn't have to come in 3 or 4 hours early, you know, to do all these prosthetics. So I hope that sort of answers that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So did the film remain, his nomination remained as it was, or?
Yeah, no, he got the nomination, and he won his second Oscar. So that was his second Oscar.
Okay, that's great. No, yeah, I think the film wouldn't have been the way what the turnout has it. The actual presentation of Harry was just, you know, perfect. Like his eyes and his mouth and his teeth, and obviously the height that Kevin possessed, and that was really played really well. One comment I wanted to make before I ask the next question. What I saw the trailer again, and it's just amazing that how I didn't show anything, which was great. Kind of like it
See,
didn't
you
really.
say that's great. Now we went round and round about that, and Sid Sheinberg, president of Universal, said we were wrong. He said you should show Harry, but we were playing kind of the ET card where you don't
Jaws as
show
well. Yeah,
the
yeah,
creature in the
yeah.
yeah, and right or wrong, I don't know. I look back at it now, and I think we made a mistake. I
You
think
think so?
we should have shown Harry on both on the poster and in the trailer. But that's hindsight. That's 40 years ago.
Yeah. But do you think that not showing Harry in the trailer hurt the film from a box office standpoint?
I do believe it did. At the time, I obviously didn't believe it would, but now in retrospect, I definitely believe it did. I think that if we'd have shown Harry, and again also on the poster, we should have shown Harry on the poster. It wouldn't have been as dramatic a poster as Harry and Danny DeVito, but it would have been, it would have shown the creature. So I do have those kind of, but those are it's afterthoughts. You can't change it. And but we did get advice from someone saying you're making a mistake. But
Yeah.
Steve and I were both locked into no, we're not going to show the creature. We're going to make people come to the movie to see the creature. No, right or wrong, I don't know. It didn't gross what it should have. Let's say what we thought it was going to gross. And the hard lesson I learned, I think next week Universal was putting out Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks in the Dragnet movie. And it was they just threw Harry under the bus and put all their energy next week into Dragnet. And it made me realize, wow, this is a business. This is really a business. Even though Harry was a pride and joy, this is a
Yeah.
business. It's like, yeah, it's like your kid just got thrown off the football team because some other, more muscular kid came in, and it's like, wow.
Yeah, but it's an interesting conversation, right? About showing and not showing. There was this. I don't know if you've seen Robert Zemeckis' Castaway and What Lies Beneath that came out the same year, with Harrison Ford, Michelle Pfeiffer, and then Tom Hanks and Helen Hunt, and both trailers pretty much gave away the film to the end. And there was a lot of I still remember when I used to run the website, there was a lot of conversation about that why would you do that? And I don't remember the exact quote by Robert Zemeckis, but paraphrasing, and he said that audience want to know what they're going into. That was his argument. And lo and behold, both films did financially really, really well. So I think it's case by case basis, and I also think it's timing. In movie business, timing is everything, and I also feel that sometimes, and I think with Harry and Henderson, I'm just, based on what you just said to me, I'm just guessing, I'm not an expert, because it wasn't, Jaws, well, I guess E.T. was a family movie, so maybe my argument is wrong, that people play into that fear with Jaws of not being shown, at least until the third act, more or less. But I think it's case by film basis. You can't. It's tough to say. You just don't know. You don't know what audience will click with and what will
Well,
click
I
with
think
and what they
I
don't.
mean, I would go with what Zemeckis said there because at that point people there's a lot more options, so people want a little more definition of which choice to help them make the choice they're going to make between the options,
Good
and
point.
so yeah, I think we were playing a game, and we could have been a little smarter. I think that's all, or a little more aware. It doesn't have to do with smartness, but just I really regret that we didn't do Harry on a poster because I had Drew Struzan, who is just an amazing poster artist, back before Photoshop,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he did. Yeah, he's just astounding. Raiders of the Lost Ark
Loves
to
work.
Harry Potter movies, E.T., everything, just astounding. He said Drew Struzan, I remained good friends with him, and he said that the poster that killed hand-drawn art for movie posters, and it really set it back, was the poster for Big with Tom Hanks. He said because
Mhm.
all they did was they made Tom Hanks's face fill the
That's it.
poster from top to bottom. and had the word big, and said that was the death of art. I remember once I actually wanted to get up and kind of punch the guy in the nose, and he's dead now, so I can say that. But he won an Oscar for Forrest Gump. Steve Tisch, producer. We were doing Wild America at Warner Brothers, and I said I would like to bring Drew Struzan in, reminded them of his resume, and to do the poster for Wild America. And Steve Tisch said, no, absolutely not. He said, when I see art on a poster, I think they're trying to hide the fact that a movie isn't good. He said, we need photographs of the stars. And I was brokenhearted. I was because it's one of the most embarrassing posters of any movie I've done. It looks like a National Geographic kids special on wild animals that aren't really wild. It's not a good poster. And I was so hurt, but that was this fella's opinion, and he was in a very high position. He was in a position to say no, and it meant no. But that was his reasoning. Any art on a poster. And I wanted to say, well, what about his posters for Star Wars? Drew's posters for Star Wars. But I thought, I'm not gonna get into this fight here. They've decided.
And I just Googled Wild America's poster, and I remember seeing that poster when it came out, and it feels like a TV movie, if anything. It just seems, and that's something you can pull off in Photoshop in like 10 minutes. Well, not back then, but nowadays you can. Yeah. But yeah, Drew was phenomenal. I mean, I don't know if you know, there's a gentleman named Paul Shipper, who is in UK, who was inspired by Drew's work, and that's what he does now. And he just did the poster for Star Trek Picard season 2 or 3, I think. If you go on Paramount Plus, whatever that image shows, that's done by him. And I was speaking to him a month ago, and he loves, like, he had the same thing about how art, and he had a conversation with Drew that, Drew said the same thing, that this medium is dead. But I'm glad to see that Paul now, and I'm sure there are more others. I do think it's gonna come back, but not in the same way as Drew did. I mean, iconic posters like Goonies, E.T., like you said, Raiders, Star Wars. I mean, there's so many that he did, so many.
So this other fella, the new fella, did he do Stranger Things? Because whoever did the poster for Stranger Things really had Drew in mind,
Yeah, no, he didn't. Paul Shipper didn't do Stranger Things, but you're right. I mean, I think the Duff brothers were mindful of that, and I think they knew that because they were making a show about the 80s, and that's what defined 80s in terms of film posters. But Drew, they definitely latched on to that feeling, and you're right. I actually didn't think about it until you just mentioned it. The posters for Stranger Things is 100% like Drew, inspired, at least, for lack of a better word. One
of his secrets was he would put a line around people, even though in real life, in a photo instance, there wouldn't be a line, but he would put a line around whether it was a detail of a hand or a head, and you could see it in his work. Just amazing. I was very fortunate on Angels in the Outfield. I hated that poster because it was a very cold, dead poster with a ball ripping through a glove, which I had seen in a previous Illustrators annual, maybe a few years before, but did not want to bust the art person who did it at Disney because, basically they were taking someone else's idea and using it. But to me, the poster was just dead. And I got them to agree to have Drew do the poster for the video release and everything. And that became the poster that I like for Angels in the Outfield. And Joe Roth, the producer at the time, gifted me with Drew's original artwork for Angels in the Outfield.
Oh, wow.
So, I do have that one piece, which is quite magnificent, with Chris Lloyd and Danny Glover and Joy Gordon-Levitt. And it was just, working with Drew was a dream come true. I mean, it was like amazing. I just wrote a poem there. Working was a dream come true. Okay, there we go.
You mentioned Angels in the Outfield. Again, watching it as a kid, and I think I got to show it to my kids now. That was an amazing movie. I loved it as a kid, when it came out. I think you have this ability to. One of the things that's missing nowadays from films is the idea, the element of story that focuses on friendships and families, right? Like the reason Stranger Things worked, at least the first couple of seasons personally for me, was that idea of friendships and, in small town and all that stuff. And I think that's what you tackled on in Harry and the Henderson, and that's what it worked for me at least. And same thing with Angels in the Outfield. So I appreciate the work that you've done, and maybe you don't feel that way, but believe me, it has impact on people for sure.
No, I'm, um, I really, I appreciate you saying that. Tell you something about Angels in the Outfield is I was an unlikely person to get that movie, and this all came from me later from Holly Goldberg Sloan, the writer. I remember reading the script and wanting the movie so bad. And what I used to do if I really wanted a movie bad, I was still living in Carmel working with Nesmith, is I would record the entire script into a cassette, and then on my various drives to LA or back and forth, I would listen to it over and over and over and over. So by the time I had the Angels in the Outfield meeting, I could literally almost quote, any line of dialogue in the movie, and I really knew the movie, from top to bottom. I remember in the meeting saying to Joe Roth and Roger Birnbaum and Holly Goldberg Sloan, I said, there's one line in the script here, it said, where Joey Gordon-Levitt's character comes out of the dugout and raises his hands, trying to create the illusion for Tony Danza that there's an angel there, to give Tony Danza the confidence to throw that last pitch. And I said, and then the team joins in behind him, and the audience, I said, this is probably the biggest moment in the movie. And they all looked at me like, are we talking to the wrong guy here? Like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And I said, this is really, really an important, this will define the movie, this scene right here. And later I got the job, and in production, Holly said to me, she said, they called in many directors, many bigger than you, and for Angels in the Outfield. And at the end of the meeting, they'd look at each other and go, that person never mentioned that one line, where Joey steps out of it. And she said it bugged them every time because nobody else brought up that one thought, that this one line could be a defining scene in the movie. And she said, ultimately, that's how I got the movie, because no one else addressed that portion. And one thing that sort of made that an extra special moment is when we premiered the movie. They premiered it in Pittsburgh, where the original Angels in the Outfield was filmed, at the stadium where the Pirates played, and they had 3 screens, giant 5-story size screens. They had 35,000 people watching the premiere. It was the biggest at the time of any premiere, and at that point, 35,000 people got up in the stadium and were raising their arms at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, that was incredible. It's a very emotional moment for me. Very emotional moment. Never forget that.
Going back to Harry and the Henderson, late Melinda Dillon, who passed away, I think last month, and what was like working with her? I mean, she was in Close Encounters. Is that how you sort of brought her on board from that movie, or what was that process of getting her?
And Christmas Story, the Close Encounters and Christmas Story, because she was the mom in Christmas Story, and it just, she was just so fantastic in there. And to me, she had that same quality that Lithgow had, to be a very serious actor who could really give me something in this very unlikely situation of them, having this fantasy creature, become part of their lives, and I didn't, that's again, why I didn't want that easy Danny DeVito, Harry, 7-foot guy, 3-foot, 5-foot guy, 7-foot guy relationship. I wanted someone who would be real, but she had that delight, and there was a crazy delight in her, in her just her nature, in her body of work as an actor. And of course that turn she did in the Paul Newman movie that got her an Academy Award nomination. I can remember watching that scene in the movie, not knowing who she was, but just totally breaking down in tears. Yeah. And realizing how powerful this woman was. I had hoped to have her in the movie The Perfect Game, which I'm really proud of. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a movie made about kids in 1957 who aspired to play baseball. It is a true story from a Mexican in this Mexican sports world. And it was the same age that I was in Toronto aspiring to be a filmmaker. So I really connected with that movie. But we had a part for a waitress, and I called Melinda and said, would you come be in the movie? And she said yes. And I was so thrilled. And the day before we were to shoot, she called up and said she couldn't do it. She said she felt that she was too old and then lost her charm. And I was so saddened by that, you know. And we got Frances Fisher filled in, and Frances had been in Wild America and a couple other things with me. And she came and filled in for Melinda. But I was really sad that I wasn't able to work with her again, because it was a really nice role. It sounds like a small role, but it was an important role in the movie.
Yeah, no,
But that's my proudest movie is Perfect Game. Next to Harry and the Hendersons, that's the movie that I treasure the most is The Perfect Game. So
I'm going to check that out, especially the fact that you mentioned that it's set in 1955. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of personal elements, personal touch to that film that you kind of remember from your childhood. Before I move on,
I shot it like a 50s movie. So I shot it very much like a 50s movie. So
you did, okay. I miss all that stuff from the 80s, 70s, 60s, and 50s, and it was really refreshing to see the way Allen shot Harry and the Henderson. You know, there were less close-ups, there was more wides and mediums, and there was not too much. You know, you notice those things now, because if you look at all the new stuff that comes out, there are so many close-ups, and I get it. Like sometimes you have to have like emotionally connected with that, you know, character. But sometimes it becomes too much that for me, I just feel suffocated. And again, it's necessary, but to a point, you know, to a certain degree. I wanted to make some comments before I go to the next question. There's a couple of things that I really noticed in the film that I really liked. You know, the fact that Henderson, he has his gun, he works at a gun store, and then he has a friend who is a Bigfoot, you know, the contradiction. And also there was a lot of times when he actually wanted to tell the world, you know, that Harry is, you know, Bigfoot or Harry are they're as much as human as we are, but then he realizes that he shouldn't say anything, and he gets out of that. Like those little things, they're very little things, but they do so much wonder to the entirety of the script and the film. And I thought those are really well inserted, and that, you know, that feeling that you have that you want to share this with everybody, and you can't. And one of my favorite scenes in the film is the mouse scene, you know, where he's in someone's house, and this woman thinks it's a mouse, and she's about to go hit him, and then, you know, the way the camera, again, Ellen, the way the camera just, she looks up, and it's such a high shot. It was phenomenally done. So I wanted to mention those three things just as a comment.
well, that's good. It's funny, the mouse scene, we had a hard time making that work, you know, because it was so corny. But, you know, to hit Harry's toe and then, you know, think it's the mouse and then look up and everything. But and I remember there was a time we took that out of the cut, but we put it back in. You know, there was you know, various things happened during the edit, but that was that was a hard to pull off, because it was silly. You know, I tried to learn this from Michael Nesmith years ago, is because there's Monkey's experience and things he'd done. He said, you know, the key is to take silly as far as you can without making it stupid, without making either the performance stupid or the actor stupid or the intent stupid, you know. But silly's okay, stupid no good.
Yeah.
And unless you're making a Dumb and Dumber movie, then stupid is perfect if you make it a dumb.
100%. You were talking about editing. Was there a scene that you cut out that you wish was in the film?
Well, that would be the scene that I was in, but no.
Oh, you were.
It wasn't. Well, it was. I'll tell you, it's not a scene I regret that we cut out. There's nothing I really regret that I can remember that we cut out that hurts the film. There was an extended scene. It was much like the scene where Harry sees the woman putting a chicken in a pot, and then looks over and sees the couple start to immerse themselves in the bubbling hot tub. You know, and he was confused by the you know, the strange.
That was a great scene, by the way. That was a great scene.
Well, there was another scene where Harry looks in on a party, and back then I haven't heard of them recently, but it was a birthday party. He looks in the window at a birthday party, and this was him discovering human life and the strangeness of human life. And a gorillagram, a girl comes in a gorillagram and sings "Happy Birthday," and then takes off the gorilla head, and it's a blonde girl. And Harry was like, like what? And then he starts to walk away, and I came running out of the house, playing maybe the host of the party or whatever. And I was a little bit, the character I played it a little bit drunk, and I'm coming out forgetting to tip the gorillagram girl. And I mistake Harry for the gorillagram girl. Oh. And I tip Harry, and he eats the money. So that was cut out of the movie, and it wasn't the greatest scene in the world. I can't say I regret that it's gone, but there's about 10 seconds of it out there in a wide shot where I go out and pay him or something. But it was a scene, but it was almost too similar to the hot tub chicken scene, which played better. It's mistaken. But again, I wanted Harry to see the strangeness of humans, that they were not such an organized species on their own.
And that was really well executed, especially even at the end when he stops John's character from hitting, and just like, you can't do that, like, you have to be a better human being. And what was so amazing about that scene is, obviously, he can't talk, but just through his eyes. And your decision of, having his eyes being the focal point, he just says so much. He says so much. So that was really, really cool too. There's a
interesting thing about the eyes is that when Rick was creating the creature, the first day we had a full suit on Kevin stand up, present Harry to me in Rick's studio. Rick had yellow contacts in Harry's eyes, and it changed the creature from peaceful and loving to kind of malevolent. There was something wrong, those yellow eyes. And so we had quite a discussion on going with these kind of not blue, but kind of turquoise eyes. And Rick said, a creature like that would never have eyes that color. I said, well, a creature like that, we've never seen a creature like this before. So we get to choose what color, And that was a decision that I stuck with and fought for, is that his eyes were also inviting. His eyes didn't put you off,
Yeah. And speaking of the creature, what kind of research did you do, and did it ever pique your curiosity that do they exist?
Yes, very, very much so. I did as much research as I could possibly do. Read everything on the people that were pro Bigfoot, people that were con Bigfoot. Learned some very interesting things, like how come that most people that see Bigfoot and UFOs only have one tooth. And you start to wonder, like, how come these phenomena don't come to what we regard as smarter, more intelligent people? They always come to someone who is kind of simple, and it sounds odd and a bit rude, but that was part of what I learned in the research. And I learned also that a Bigfoot, according to myth, whatever, could be standing 10 feet from you in the forest, and because that's his home and in his natural habitat, if he didn't move, you wouldn't even know he was there. And in the very end of the movie, we got the Harry stunt suit, the backup suit, and Kevin in the Harry suit. And Rick had a smaller animal suit that we modified to be a baby Bigfoot suit. And I remember standing everybody very still in front of the camera there, and then giving them a cue to come to life. And my co-producer on the movie, Dick Vane, he said, why are we doing this? Why are we wasting time doing this? I can see everyone standing there. I said, yeah, you can, because you have two eyes. I said, the camera has one eye. The camera only has one eye. And he goes, and we went on a little bit about that and everything, but we got the shot and everything. I remember in dailies, when the shot came up, it's like, Nick Vane didn't say, oh, here's a shot where he didn't say it. He just, it came up and you were watching the shot, and he was caught up in the moment of Harry and them saying goodbye. Harry turned to leave. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, yet they were right in front of your eyes, all these creatures came to life. And Dick Vane said, holy shit. holy shit. And then he realized, that time back in Seattle on the set, maybe months and months ago, that he had sort of fought that moment. But it was just, and that was also me, coming up through camera and everything else, and telling Alan that I think this will work. And Alan said, yes, the camera has one eye. Of course it's going to work.
Yeah, no, and some of the locations where you shot it, Seattle, and I think you also shot in Oregon, in Bend, Oregon. They were just beautiful. And was that something that, obviously, I mean, there's always like a location, department, but was your desire always to shoot it in that part of the United States?
Yeah, I really wanted to shoot it up in Washington, where you had the trees and the mountains. I wanted that kind of wilderness. And Seattle at that time was a very film friendly city. The only
Mhm.
the only thing Seattle did to hurt us was it would take so long at night for it to get dark, that if we had night shoots to do, you'd have to wait till almost 10 o'clock at night to shoot. And
Oh,
that made it hard, especially with
yeah.
having kids in the cast. They have to stop by 12, and all those kind of rules and things.
Did you go through that part of not having the actors present at the same time for the scene, and you had to shoot them separately? Was that ever the case?
No,
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 because it didn't feel like it at
I
all.
can't remember. I wonder if we ever did a pickup with anybody where we had that situation. No, everybody was pretty much there, and I wanted everybody to be there. I mean, I've had to do movies where you have to shoot, one side of a scene and the actor isn't there, and the other side of a scene when the actor finally shows up, maybe a week later or something. But no, everybody was pretty much there, and it became, even David Suchet, who played the Bigfoot hunter, LaFleur. He, you know, we became like a family, and even though he was the black sheep in the Harry and the Hendersons family, there, they were all family, and he loved Kevin and the whole process as much as anybody. So I think
Yeah.
I'm wandering a little bit there, but
No, no, no. It's all good. And I wanted to know. I'm guessing the answer is probably pretty simple, but the dog in the film, and having him getting accustomed to Kevin's suit, like what was like that like, because dogs obviously they sense things, and but to see him in that, see it like this giant creature which he's probably never seen before, was there something like the dog was trained, or you got used to it over time, or?
that's funny. Well, we're kind of dog people. We've always had little dogs. The scene where little Bob jumps up over the counter, that's something that our dog would do at home. So I put it in the movie. He wanted to see what's going on the counter, and he could jump high enough just to get that half-second glimpse of what was
Yeah.
going on the counter. So I didn't think about that. The dog was trained. We had
Yeah, of course.
they it was Zane Grey, the guy who wrote Tarzan. His daughter was the dog trainer.
Okay. Okay.
And uh, and I remember, this is just an offshoot story of the dog, but I don't remember him having to sort of acclimate to this big hairy creature. I think probably the dog had done enough movies with lights and people and everything moving around that it was part of what was going on. But I remember when Harry's down in the basement, and we wanted the dog, little Bob, to run to the door and really, say there's something down there, scratching and barking and everything. And so the woman, I guess, I don't know if this is right or wrong or terrible or what. The woman had a very small monkey. And so what she would do, she would put the monkey behind the door, and that would antagonize the dog. And so the monkey would think this dog is coming to kill me, but there's a door between them. And the dog would go, if I can get that monkey, I'm going to kill it. So that's why in the movie, little Bob, when he races towards that door where Harry's in the basement, you hear this thud. That's a little dog smashing right into the door. He wants to get that monkey. And I remember one of the crew members saying, God, imagine how that dog feels. And then someone else said, imagine how that monkey feels. Here's this predator coming at you for like 5 takes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we had a stunt double for the dog, which was just a stand-up dog where we would put little Bob for lighting and stuff, but it never stood up. So we stand it up and it would fall over. So that the stand-in for little Bob nickname became Dead Bob. So they did, okay, bring in Dead Bob, and they just throw the dog on the floor and use that for lighting. I don't know why. Over the course of the production, that dog would never stand up. Yeah.
I
I have
really
Dead
like
Bob's.
that. Sorry.
I said nothing. I can't remember where Dead Bob is right now, but I know he's around somewhere. So
I really like that scene in the end when David's character throws the dog and then Harry just catches him. I mean, just that shot of him throwing it, cutting it to the dog going in the air, and then him grabbing it. Like it was just the pacing of that was perfect. It was a really cool scene to watch, shot to watch, I should say. But that was really nice. I really enjoyed. And I actually, when I saw it recently, I went back and I watched it again just to kind of, how it was cut. It was really nicely done.
yeah,
And
that was an idea I had early on. I was hoping we could pull that off, and I was quite satisfied with how that came off too, with the throw and the catch. You know,
yeah,
I wanted it to be totally unexpected. The guy throwing a dog was like, oh, but I wanted almost instantly a really satisfying and maybe extra satisfying resolve to this guy throwing a dog. You know, and
yeah.
that was Harry catching.
I certainly had a gasp moment even after I watched it after a long time. Like I knew it was coming, but just that moment when the dog is in the air, like, oh, it's gonna happen to him. The museum in the film, was that constructed for the? I'm just imagining it was for the film.
Yes, yeah, the Wrightwoods, place. That was an old building, and they redressed it and everything, and put that old Airstream out in the back and everything. But that was basically a set, in an old dilapidated building, that was on
Yeah,
the roadside there with a
and
nice mountain behind it.
yeah, that was really nice touch. And were you involved in the series that came out for 3 seasons?
No, I was movie guys and television guys were not there was not that intermingling that there seems to be now, amongst the two crafts. And I think because the movie didn't gross maybe up to its potential, they
Yeah,
saw the benefit of doing a series, but they wanted to go with TV directors, people that would get these 22-minute episodes out in a day, or out in a 5 or 6 day schedule, whatever it was. I remember watching, and I think I only watched one of them, and it ran for 2 seasons, and I only watched one, and that was because they had taken the character of Harry and, to me, treated him like a family dog. He was not regarded as a person, a being, as we would respect members of our family. He was not regarded as a member of the family in my mind in what they did. It was more, he was there to set up or be the brunt of jokes, and that kind of hurt me a bit. I was grateful again that they had taken it and expanded it. There was a sound show that ran on the Universal tour for 15 years, the Harry and the Hendersons sound show,
oh,
when they
really?
would have, scenes from the movie and putting in the growls and putting in the sounds and all that. That's one thing about Universal, is that back then, and they probably still do it, but they would amortize, a current movie or something and turn it into an attraction if something had I think that came after the video was successful, that the Universal Sound Show came up. But someone reminded me recently that it was there for 15 years. And I remember going to see that, and that was fine because it brought back great moments of when we were, putting the sound to Harry and
Right.
stuff. So
Yeah.
it created its own little world for a while.
And what was your biggest challenge on the film?
Uh,
Whether was
my
it?
biggest challenge, well, my biggest challenge was really, I'm also a producer on the film, and I told them that I wanted to be a producer and I would not, stick my fingers in to what they regarded as producing, but my role as producer would be to see that the creature was believable, to really, do everything I could without just trying to throw money at the problem, which, rarely is a good solution, but to do everything to really make this creature workable. And I said, then otherwise I won't step on anybody's toes, but I am going to be very, very strict in making Harry. So that was my, that was my biggest challenge, was to make the creature believable. Again, believable as a scary being, believable as a silly being, never really stupid. I remember showing up at Rick Baker's doorstep I had, again, 40 pages of the screenplay, and I had a small bust of Harry that I had made out of clay and made a casting of it. And one half of the face was Harry smiling, and the other half was eyebrows clenched down and Harry growling. And I remember putting my hand over half the face, and it would be the growling Harry, and the other half and the smiling. And Rick was kind of, he said, "You made this?" Yeah, he says, "It's really nice." He said, "Yeah, I always fantasized." He had done Planet of the Apes, or not Planet. He had done some other, I forget what it was, but he had done something where he had distinguished himself as a person who could really understand, that ape culture and the creatures. And he said, I've always wanted to do a Bigfoot movie. And he said, but you don't have a studio behind you. You did this before Amazing Stories, before anything, before meeting with Spielberg and all that. He said, so the truth is you probably can't afford me. So, but I wish you good luck with your project, So then later when we got the movie deal, I went back to Rick. He's the first one I went to, because he was the only guy to do it, but we had the money, I said, well, okay, you can't use that excuse now. So, and Rick really, he embraced it. I think that was one of his still is one of his favorite creatures that he ever, conceived and built.
No, he did a phenomenal job. And Bill, what are you working on now, if that's something that you can reveal, or what keeps you busy? Are you working on any projects?
Yeah, I'm working. We've got a wide range of films that we'd like to do, but now films with streaming and everything else, and theaters not being the primary outlet for films, it's very rare that, like this past weekend, that Cocaine Bear gets a shot at being a very low budget independent film that gets a really big release. So now we have to think of films, where would they stream? What would be the venue? Because they're probably not going to spend the money to mount an advertising campaign to go out to thousands of theaters unless it's a very, very big movie. So we're doing films both from wacky comedies to we have a silly shark movie, and in the Sharknado mode, but we think it's funnier and more sophisticated. I have a couple of teen comedies that I would love to get going. We have a creature comedy, which is like Harry in the Hendersons in a way, in that a family encounters this creature, and the creature sort of tells them how to become a better family. That's sort of in a Goonies type world. I'm being really vague on these. I have a Western series, a 6 or 8 part series that I'm writing. I just love Westerns, and Time Rider. I haven't done a real Western since Time Rider years ago, and I really miss it. But I'm writing that, and also I'm involved now in a project that I co-wrote with a guy named Ron Walters called Lusitania, and it's a strange take on why the Lusitania sunk so strangely, because the Titanic took 2 hours and 45 minutes to sink. Lusitania sank in 18 minutes. But it was carrying a lot of arms for the Brits, and there was, secondary explosions going off everywhere and all kinds of things. So I'm involved in projects that range from, Lusitania to the silly creature project called Blabbermouth, to Sharkaconda, to we have one where they call it Crashing Vegas, where these 4 kids, and one is a movie maker kid and a makeup artist kind of guy wannabe, and they learn that the annual fishing trip their dads all go on has been a lie all these years, and the dads basically go to Vegas and party and screw around, gamble, get drunk, do whatever. So the guy decides 2 bags get switched. They find their father's bags with all the Vegas tickets and everything else, and they decide, the guy says, well, I've got molds of everybody's face, I'll make us up as our dads. We'll just go to Vegas on their dime. So it's called Crashing Vegas, and it's the 4 kids made up as their dads to go to Vegas. And it's kind of funny. And I like it. It's not a movie where when they put the makeup on, you then go to that actor who they're made up as. Oh, I want, this is the kind of thing, is like, wow, these kids are pulling off a scam. Is that nose going to stay on through the whole scam? Is that, it's just a funny teen comedy, but I don't see many teen comedies anymore. There was an era when, Role Models, or American Pie, there was a bunch of teen comedies, Superbad. You don't see a lot of those anymore. So it's a changing world, but So I have some fantasies going. I have a Western going. I have a movie for the faith-based community that I really love called Rosie's Christmas Miracle. And it's just a sweet little Christmas story because I do like Christmas movies. I got to do a movie called Santa Who with Leslie Nielsen, and I loved it, you know. And in contrast to that, I did a movie, one dabbled into horror with Crispin Glover called Simon Says, and I hated it. I mean, every morning was blood and body parts, and I'm thinking, this is not me. I'm supposed to be making people laugh. You know, what's going on here? It was not a good experience, and it was again a learning lesson for me. You know,
Right.
just because the horror genre is out there and could be profitable, not for me.
Yeah, no, and you worked on The Rocketeer as well, right? As a story person.
Yeah, that's not a happy story with me. I basically, read the screenplay you see is my screenplay, and I end up with a story credit. I walked it in as the director, and through the way the system works, I got replaced, and it's a heartbreaker for me. That one, that's a real heartbreaker.
Well, it was a great script. I mean, and you're right about the teen movies, and even like movies like Rocketeer. Those are not really teen comedy, not made anymore. And one of the things I actually was reading about that. I mean, generally comedies are not being made anymore, like good comedies, because comedies are supposed to, poke fun at things, poke fun at people, poke fun at different elements. And a lot of times nowadays, everybody's kind of afraid to do that because of the way our society has become. And I hope that changes because.
Good observation.
Sorry?
That's a good observation. That's very good. It's yeah.
Yeah, no, it's.
Yeah, we're being too.
No, I hope that obviously you have to be in certain limitation, but who defines that limitation? Like, what's the limitation of comedy? Like, what makes people laugh and what it doesn't? I mean, films like even films like, not like a teen movie, but like spoof films that came out in '90s, Hot Shots and The Naked Gun, and then in the '70s Airplane, like all that stuff. Like those, don't get make anymore. I don't know if there's no audience for it or what it is, but maybe it's us that we miss it. But I certainly hope that the film that you're working on, the teen comedy, this start a trend, because I do think that right now is that time, because there's always like a cycle of things, right? So hopefully you can initiate.
One of the things that you sort of hit on there is that because of our new viewing habits, and because of, whether it was the 2-year lapse for theaters with COVID and everything, but comedies are, to me, always best enjoyed when you're in a full house of people that want to see that movie, and you have that communal sharing of the laughter. And I saw some observation on TV last week where someone said that it was someone either on Colbert Show or something, reflecting on the fact that if you're home with yourself just alone or with a few family members and you're watching a comedy film, you don't have a tendency to laugh out loud as much as you do in the theater situation. So maybe but it would take, of course, it's kind of a catch-22, because it would take the theater audience wanting to go back to this comedy, to a comedy in mass, to once again realize, this is kind of fun laughing with all these people. And then you talk about how some comedies couldn't be made today. I tell people, watch Blazing Saddles. I mean, it is like, it breaks every rule you can imagine, but it is still hilarious. And I'm kind of grateful for the fact that it got to exist, even though now you go, oh my goodness, did he just say that? Oh, damn, did he just say that?
Yeah, no, and I think you're bang on about the theatrical experience. And I think along with comedy, thriller and horror is something that you want to watch with the audience too. Yes. I went to see the Lost World, Jurassic Park 2, when it came out. I wasn't too crazy about the film, but the experience, I remember I went on a Wednesday afternoon. The film was supposed to come out on Friday, but they had like a Wednesday showing and a Thursday showing. Sometimes they would have that. And it was a brand new theater in Mississauga, the Coliseum. And I went to buy the tickets in the afternoon, and then me and my brother, we went in the evening, and they had, I'm willing to bet 30 plus screens, right? Every screen was dedicated to Jurassic Park 2. And it was like literally like we didn't, it was a massive multiplex. We didn't have room to walk. It was so tight. And my brother and I sat completely, far away from each other, but just that experience of people, when the logo came up and the music kicked in, that you just fall into that. And even if the film is not that great at the end, the experience certainly, stays with you. And it certainly has with me.
Well, I'm sort of hoping for that on a not as big as Jurassic experience, but with the audience that would want to see my Christmas movie, because it's a perennial, it's a Christmas themed movie, and it's a very uplifting film, and it's a lot of fun. It's a comedy. It's a comedy about Christmas, not a silly comedy like Airplane, but a genuine, again, human emotion comedy. There's a lot of emotion. My wife says to me, if you're always making comedies, how come at the end I'm always crying? Maybe that works out, so.
Yeah, no, I certainly will keep an eye out on your work and the ones that are coming up, and obviously go back and see some of your older work, the ones that you've mentioned, and would love to be in touch again, hopefully in the future, and talk about more stuff in films.
Oh, sure. I don't get these opportunities, and I find someone said to me the other day, said, "Well, what are you going to say?" I said, "I don't know. It depends on what he asks me. Something will come up, and I find I just love to talk about this stuff. I guess because it meant so much and means so much to me, and such a gift to have created something that people will share, in whatever, for forever. Who knows, I'm so grateful when people remember Harry, remember a title that I did, I'm just grateful that I could be the person who brought that, to life,
And just to kind of wrap it up, I would say this with most sincerity, that movies like Harry and the Henderson, or specifically Harry and the Henderson, I have such a vivid memory of watching that, going to the library and getting it from the library because I was looking for Amblin projects, like what Amblin was working on or what they had done, and just watching it, and for it to stay with me this long, that as a testament to your work and to what you did. So you should be very proud of that.
Well, I'm very grateful you're saying that, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of Harry. Like I said, I'm Harry and The Perfect Game, my two best movies, I think. I hope you get to see The Perfect Game.
I will check it out.
Again, I'm not done yet. That's what I like to say. I'm not done yet.
Good. That's the great attitude of a great storyteller, and I'm glad to hear that. And I'll watch The Perfect Game, and I'll send you an email and let you know what you think. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And thank you for.
I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Nice talking to you. We'll be in touch.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.